Hey, big agitator with the second installment of pistol reloading here in my shop. So, say you bought a set of dies, and in this case these are Lee dies. You bought a set of dies after doing some research and you found some you like, and now we got to set them up. So, if you have a single stage press, you're going to do one die at a time. In this case we're working with a turret press which revolves. With the turret press, what you want to do to prep this, first thing you want to do is figure out what size your primers are. Now I'm working with large Magnum pistol primers, so the priming mechanism of this press looks like so. And we'll explain how that works later, but there are two that come with this press, and you want to make sure you put in the right one. You pick the one that your primer fits nicely into, and simply drop it in to your press before you put the shell holder in. Done. Take your shell holder that came with your dies, if you bought a Lee set. Put your shell holder into the top of the ram. Now that part of your setup is done. First thing you want to do, put a little oil around this turret, right where it's gonna, you can see the oil going around there. Set your turret up in here. Follow the instructions that come with the press. It's pretty simple, but you just line up your splines and drop that down in. Now don't force rotate this too much if it won't turn, because there's a delicate plastic cam in here and you can damage that. People have had trouble with those. First step in installing dies. Make sure you know which way your press turret rotates. Make sure you know what order to put your dies into the turret. Now, making sure all your dies are the same caliber, it says right on them that these are for reloading 44 Magnum / 44 Special. I'm going to start with my decapping resizing die. Start screwing it in. Make sure your locking nut is backed off so it's out of your way. With the full length sizer die started into the press, extend your ram all the way up so that your lever is all the way down. Now what this does is it gives you a gap right here. Screw the full length sizer die down until it touches that shell holder. Make sure your shell holder is in when you do this. Don't torque it, just put it snug, finger tight. With the full length sizer touching your shell holder with the piston all the way extended, simply finger tighten this locking nut down. Already done this, but there's a decapping pin that we mentioned previously that is in this collet here. You're going to need a 1/2 inch and a 3/4 inch wrench. You're going to put the larger wrench on the bottom here. You're going to make sure that this is torqued down to the point that the decapping pin can't be pushed up through. This is a safety mechanism so that if you put too much force on the pin, it'll simply slide up instead of breaking. But you want to make sure that's tightened down properly, and usually about flush, a little less than flush with the tip here is fine on that pin. So we got our first die installed. And if you're using a resizer that is not a carbide die, be sure to lubricate all your brass, or actually lubricate the die. Otherwise that'll cause excessive die wear. Second die in the set, the powder through expander die. We're going to screw that down. And what they say to do is, again, follow your instructions. Screw it down until it touches the shell holder. And then back it out one full turn. Okay, now that I tightened down the powder through expander die until it touched the shell holder and backed it out one full turn, I finger tightened my locking nut. Now we're going to come back to this die and make sure it's set right. Let's move on to the next die in the meantime. Okay, next is the bullet seating die. And what we're going to do is back off that lock nut, put the ram all the way up, roll this sucker down until it contacts the shell holder. Now I mentioned play in this press before. Now you'll see there's play here. We're going to factor that in because when we tighten this down snug, it's going to actually take up that slack. Now we're going to roll back 3 full turns. I went all the way in, then I backed off 3 full turns on this seating die, then finger tightened as tight as I could the locking nut there. Now this controls your bullet depth in the case. I'll explain how to calibrate that later. You start with it backed all the way off, and you go from there. Let's use this sucker. We're back around to the first position. We got our decapping die here and sizing. Now you'll see that primer seeder is in the way. Pull your lever until that's out of the way. Put in one of your cleaned shell casings, and when that's all the way in, you pull your lever down, forcing. Now you're forcing the primer out as you do this, and you're also resizing. You'll hear the primer pop out. Now with that all the way up, pull the lever back and don't go all the way down, go about halfway. Now you're going to put a new primer in at this stage. This is cool. I'm not working with a live primer. Again, this is a dummy round. It's an old primer. I'm going to put it right in this primer seating cup. Make sure that's in there. Once in a while you'll get a metal filing in there. Make sure the primer doesn't have any metal filings sitting messing it up. Now on the downstroke, you'll see that this priming device goes into center, and it's going to force the case down right onto that primer. And now with a backstroke towards the press on the lever, you're going to be forcing a new primer into this case. And that's all it took. Let's see that here. So now you have pressed a primer in. And make sure these are flush. Once in a while I check them. You make sure that primer's all the way in. But don't force it if it won't go in. Now during the entire reloading process I wear safety glasses. I think that's always a good idea. Because once in a while you'll get a primer that goes off or something. Thankfully I haven't had it happen, but it's not good if it does. Now, you'll notice that our turret has rotated conveniently to the next position. So, I'm going to force the case up into this die, which will expand the mouth of the case. So I went all the way down. Now, at this stage, you'd normally dump in your pre-measured amount of powder, and it would fill the shell casing. Now, instead of doing that, we're just doing a dry run here. I'm going to pull this down. Now we've got our case with a flared mouth so that bullet seating is easier. We're going to check that. Now the way you check this is you start with their factory setting, what they tell you to set it up with, and then you try to put a bullet in. All you have to do is be able to set your bullet on top and have it sit true. What you don't want is to expand this case too much, because you won't get as many uses out of your brass. Now with that bullet set on there, normally you'd have powder in there, we're going to press this back up into the bullet seating die. And we're going to go all the way up. Now you'll notice we didn't seat the bullet enough. We want to get into that top crimp groove. You'll also notice that there's a little bit of shaved lead on the side of the shell casing. Now that's okay. What you do want to do is we'll tweak that expander die just a little. We'll put it down just another 1/16 of a turn, and it'll expand that case a little bit more, and we won't shave any lead off here. So you simply just play with that die, and you get it set up so that the bullets go in nice and happy, but you're not flaring it any more than you have to. Now to set up this die, what we're going to do, obviously it's not seated deeply enough, we're going to just take up a little on the seating adjustment, and we're going to try again. You'll see it's a little bit more. Now we got that in, so it's looking nice. Now what we want to do is set it up so it'll crimp. So what we're going to do is we're going to rotate. Usually you can rotate the die without changing the locking nut. Just spin that down. In this case we do have to back off the locking nut. Okay, I went in about a quarter turn on that die. Now this is interesting. You've got your seating depth set up right. Now this is a nice trick. You got your seating depth set, but it's not crimping yet. Okay, now you know what it's seated at. You like it. Back this sucker out of your way. Okay, that's not going to do anything to the bullet now. The bullet's already seated to the right level. Now, we've gone in a little bit on this die. We're going to try and crimp, and I feel a little resistance. We crimped a little. We want to crimp a little bit more, so we're going to go in a little dite more on this die. Okay, I'm about a half a turn in on the die from the original setting. Again, I got my adjuster backed all the way out. I'm going to try again. Got a little bit better crimp. I had to go in a tad more, so I'm about a turn in. You know, your mileage may vary. You got to just sneak up on it. Don't just go all at once. But I've got this bullet. I got a nice crimp on here. You can see that the case, the brass, is curved inward. I'm not using a good bullet. This is just junk stuff, but it serves its purpose for demonstration. Now we got that crimped. So normally, at this stage, you'd have a finished round. Now, all we have to do to finish our calibration is we're going to put this all the way back up. We've got our die set to crimp in the right place. We've got our lock nut tightened down. Now with the ram all the way up, all we got to do is tighten down on this adjuster until it hits the bullet. And a little bit snug on there. Now it's always going to seat the bullet at the exact same level and crimp it at the same time. So you don't have to mess with this anymore. Just check the first couple rounds that come through and make sure they're seated to the right dimension, and make a few tweaks if you have to. But it should crimp just right and seated at the right height. And at that stage, you're all set. You got a finished round. I'll go over the secondary crimp die afterwards. We'll do the next installation. We'll talk about that and how to use that.